Few technologies have reshaped the landscape of modern conflict as dramatically as the drone. Once a distant dream of military engineers, unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, have evolved from crude experimental machines into the centerpiece of 21st century warfare. Their history is a story of innovation, adaptation, and controversy, an evolution spanning more than a century of technological progress and shifting doctrines of war. The roots of drone warfare trace back to the First World War, when the U.S. military pursued the concept of pilotless aircraft. In 1918, the U.S. Army introduced the Kettering bug, an early cruise missile prototype built by Charles Kettering. Essentially a biplane with a simple guidance system, the bug was designed to carry explosives over enemy lines and crash into targets. Though innovative, it was never deployed in combat, highlighting the limitations of technology in the early 20th century. The interwar period saw continued experimentation. Both Britain and the United States tested radio-controlled aircraft such as the Fairy Queen and the radioplane OQ-2, primarily as aerial targets for training gunners. These were not true combat drones but foreshadowed the potential of remote-controlled warfare. The Second World War accelerated drone development dramatically. Germany deployed the V-1 flying bomb, also known as the Buzz Bomb, which terrorized London in 1944-45. Although not remotely piloted, it represented a significant milestone as a mass-produced, pilotless weapon of terror. The Allies also pursued drone concepts. The U.S. experimented with Project Aphrodite, modifying B-17 bombers into radio-controlled flying bombs filled with explosives. While the project suffered from frequent technical failures, it underscored the military's growing interest in replacing human pilots with remote control systems when missions were too dangerous. The Cold War era transformed drones from crude weapons into sophisticated reconnaissance platforms. In the 1960s and 70s, the U.S. relied heavily on the Ryan Firebee for aerial photography and intelligence gathering, particularly over Vietnam and China. These missions demonstrated drones' ability to collect intelligence without risking pilots in hostile airspace. Israel became a pioneer of UAV tactics in the late 1970s and early 1980s. In the 1982 Lebanon War, Israeli forces used drones for real-time surveillance and as decoys to confuse Syrian air defenses. This integration of UAVs into combined arms operations foreshadowed modern doctrines of networked warfare. The end of the Cold War brought a surge in UAV innovation. During the 1991 Gulf War, U.S. forces deployed the RQ-2 Pioneer drone for reconnaissance. Famously, Iraqi soldiers surrendered to a Pioneer UAV, believing it heralded incoming strikes, an early example of drones' psychological impact. In the mid-1990s, the U.S. introduced the RQ-1 Predator, a medium-altitude long-endurance drone initially designed for surveillance. The Predator's real breakthrough came when engineers mounted AGM-114 Hellfire missiles onto it, transforming drones from passive observers into active strike platforms. This innovation marked the birth of armed drone warfare. After the September 11th attacks, drones became central to the U.S. war on terror. The first armed drone strike occurred in Afghanistan in 2001, targeting al-Qaeda operatives. From then on, UAVs like the Predator and later the MQ-9 Reaper became synonymous with targeted killings across Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia. The advantages were clear. Drones could loiter over hostile regions for hours, gather intelligence, and launch precise strikes without risking pilots. However, the growing reliance on drones sparked fierce debate. Critics highlighted civilian casualties, legal ambiguities surrounding extrajudicial killings, and the psychological toll on populations living under constant drone surveillance. By the 2010s, the United States no longer held a monopoly on drone warfare. Other nations rapidly developed their own capabilities. China emerged as a major drone exporter, producing systems like the Winglong and CH-series UAVs, which were sold widely to Middle Eastern and African nations. Iran built a domestic drone program, supplying armed UAVs to proxy groups across the region. Turkey developed the Bayraktar TB2, a relatively inexpensive but highly effective combat drone that gained international attention for its role in Syria, Libya, and especially the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War, where it devastated Armenian armor and air defenses. These examples demonstrated that drones were no longer exclusive to superpowers. They had become accessible tools of modern warfare for mid-sized nations, and even non-state actors. The 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine marked a turning point in drone warfare. Unlike past conflicts dominated by asymmetric insurgencies, drones became decisive in a large-scale state-on-state war. Both Russia and Ukraine employed Iranian-made Shahed drones, Turkish Bayraktar TB2S, and US-supplied Switchblade loitering munitions. Commercial quadcopters, modified with cameras and grenades, turned into frontline tools for reconnaissance and strike. Drone swarms scouted artillery targets, dropping improvised bombs directly into enemy trenches. The Ukraine conflict demonstrated the democratization of drone warfare. Even cheap, off-the-shelf drones could have strategic effects. It also accelerated counter-drone technologies from electronic jamming to anti-air lasers. Looking forward, the battlefield of tomorrow is set to be dominated by increasingly autonomous systems. Programs like the US Air Force's Skyborg and DARPA's Air Combat Evolution, ACE, are training artificial intelligence to fly drones, conduct dogfights, and make split-second combat decisions. Meanwhile, the concept of drone swarms, hundreds of drones working cooperatively, promises to overwhelm defenses. Maritime and undersea drones, such as the US Navy's Sea Hunter and Russia's Poseidon nuclear-powered torpedo, are expanding the drone domain beyond the skies. Yet these advancements come with ethical and legal challenges. Should AI be trusted to decide life or death without human oversight? How can international law regulate drone assassinations or autonomous swarms? These questions remain unanswered as military technology races ahead of global norms. From the fragile Kettering bug of 1918 to the AI-driven swarms of the 2020s, the history of drone warfare mirrors the broader trajectory of modern military technology, toward greater precision, greater automation, and greater distance between human combatants and the battlefield. What began as experimental pilotless aircraft has become a dominant force shaping the geopolitics of the 21st century. Drones are no longer just tools of surveillance. They are weapons, psychological instruments, and symbols of the future of war. As nations test ever more advanced autonomous systems, the drone's evolution raises profound questions about the nature of conflict itself, the value of human oversight, and the blurred line between machine and soldier.